As a parent of two college age students, I have been recently privy to the intense amount of pressure and anxiety that both kids and their parents encounter when faced with thinking about our kids' future. It can be daunting, not only for kids that are going to college, but especially for those kids that maybe college isn't the path that they really want to take. So today's guest is Karen Klein. She's the author of Rethinking College, A Guide to Thriving Without a Degree. And she spends some time opening up our eyes to the multitude of possibilities out there for people to live joyful and happy and successful lives that maybe go beyond college. I want to share that this is not an anti-college episode. It is an episode that hopefully allows us all to take a step back and think about what we want for our kids' future and what they want for their future and what's going to drive them to be the best possible human that they can be, and maybe lower some of that anxiety and pressure that comes along when they are venturing out into the world on their own. A little bit about Karen. She is a longtime editorial writer for the Los Angeles Times, covering education, parenting, and health. She has won numerous awards, including sharing in 2 Pulitzer Prizes, and is currently a fellow with the Institute for Citizens and Scholars. And most recently, like I mentioned before, she is the author of Rethinking College, A Guide to Thriving Without a Degree, published by HarperCollins. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today on This Way Up. I am passionate about the topic that we're going to be discussing, and so glad to hear that you have written a book. And I would like to start off really about what inspired you to write it.
It really came about over years and years of noticing things around me. I've been an editorial writer for the Times on education for a long time. So I've noticed all these things, like there was the big push that everybody had to go to college and they all had to take all the courses that were required for a 4-year college. And I was wondering why we were doing that to people who maybe didn't want to go to college. And I also noticed there were people who worked jobs that had never before required a college degree. The jobs hadn't changed, but the requirement had changed. And people who had years of experience and all kinds of skills at something like being, say, an office administrator could not even get in the door for an interview simply because they lacked that piece of paper. And this struck me as very wrong. And I wrote a couple of editorials about it. They caught the notice of an agent and an editor who asked me to write a book about it, because I think right now the country actually is accepting the idea that not everybody has to go to college. You can live a great life without college. But then what we don't do is say, okay, how? How are you going to do it? You don't have this nice, neat funnel taking you into a narrow pathway that you can follow without having to put much initiative into it, much thought into it, much risk into it. So this, and students don't really know what's out there in the real world. For that matter, I think my book is helpful for college students because they don't know what's out there in the real world for the most part either. So it's to introduce people to the many fields that are out there and how they can go about entering those fields. It's obviously not all inclusive. There are other things. I was just introduced to the idea of court reporters who actually make a lot of money. They have to study for 2.5 years and so on and so forth. So it's not every single job you can get without a 4-year degree, but it will open people's minds to the thought of what is out there and how you go about it. Because college counselors, school counselors, do not have a lot of knowledge about that. And we actually have a new poll from the Gallup organization showing that students who aren't interested in college, who aren't planning to go to college, nonetheless hear about college all the time at school. It's all anybody talks about, all the adults talk to them about. And when they want guidance about what to do besides college, only 20% of them say they're getting real help on that.
So, back to what we are as adults putting in our children's brains from an early age is really a single path. I remember my children in first grade, kindergarten, they were having college days and the kids were supposed to wear college jerseys, which, okay, first of all, you're supposed to be thinking about what you're playing. Are you playing with Play-Doh or are you playing on the swing? Not really college. I understand us wanting as parents to introduce different opportunities to our kids at a young age as to, okay, do you want to be an astronaut or do you want to be a chef or do you want, but I think that at these schools, it's just boom. What college are you going to go to? And it becomes this really the only path that they're thinking about, and from not only the parents, from the schools, from all adults, period.
Yeah. And in doing that, the message that we give is that not going to a four-year college is an inferior thing to do.
Right.
It is for stupider people.
Mm-hmm.
All the smart people are going to college. I can tell you that was not true.
Right.
We're sending a message that you are dooming yourself to an inferior life, and you are in fact inferior if you don't get a bachelor's degree. And that's simply untrue.
You know what I found so enlightening and uplifting in your book was that you didn't define success and a quality life as how much money you're making. You explored all different facets. There were some that did make good money, but there were some that were leading beautiful, comfortable, joyful lives.
Yes.
With a career that maybe wasn't your doctor, lawyer, etc. And they were still having, just a beautiful life.
Yeah, I think I picked the word for the title very carefully. It's How to Thrive Without a Degree, a guide to thriving without a degree, not succeeding or making a lot of money or anything like that. Now, there are a lot of people in the book who are making a lot of money.
Sure.
And I do want everybody to be able to sustain themselves and sustain their lives, because that's the reality of life. We have to do that.
Right.
But the people I talk to are thriving. They love their work. They're able to support themselves, whether it is at a middle class level or a wealth level. That's not what interests me as much, as long as they can do that. But they are happy with what they are doing. They are happy with how their lives are set up. And to see people with that level of satisfaction, when we actually know that 45% of people with a bachelor's degree are 10 years later, even 10 years later, doing jobs that don't require a bachelor's degree. They're underemployed and they're not happy because they thought a bachelor's degree was going to lead them to all of these wonderful, thriving things, exciting jobs and big money. And they find out there's a lot more to it than that. And they're not sure what that is and where they went wrong.
Well, what's interesting is, as humans, we all have our own unique skill sets, right? And we have our own unique passions. And when we're taking somebody, this is my opinion, when we're taking somebody who has a passion to, let's just say, work with their hands, let's just say that, or cook, and we're driving them down this path that they need to go to a 4-year college, we as a society are not creating a skilled workforce, because we're putting that person into doing a job that they're really not, maybe they'll excel in, but probably because there's no passion and there's no drive and there's no innate skill in that, they're going to be doing something that is not in the long run really benefiting society with what they could be providing to society.
And employers are complaining quite a bit that college graduates do not have the skills that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about that they need graduate school. We're talking about they need to be able to think.
Yeah.
They need to be able to analyze. They need to be able to get along with other people, work as a team, be a leader. These are huge things. They have to know how to network. Mm-hmm. No one teaches these things in school, either in high school or in college. They're things that people learn out there knocking around. And It's actually among the big things that people learn in some of these other paths that I carve out for them, especially the volunteer path. People in these residential volunteer jobs are really learning a lot of people skills, a lot of what employers call soft skills. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what they say is most lacking
Mm.
in the workforce these days.
I
And so
believe
there
that.
are many ways to learn that. I will tell you, you're probably not going to learn it in college. Yeah.
So, we're a mental health or a podcast for parents and caregivers of family members who have challenges with mental health. And I look at mental health as being there's two facets of it. You've got the long term people that have a chronic mental health issue, and then you've got the ones that maybe are, more episodic. And I think this touches on both pieces there. And I'm going to start with the episodic because I think that as a society, we may be contributing to the anxiety that these kids are feeling at a young age because they're being pressured into a single path rather than a multitude of paths. And when you're a child, the world is open to you. Did you come across anything, or what are your feelings on that? How it's affecting the mental health of the kids, as they're moving into adulthood?
It's funny. There's a book that I tend to think of as sort of the twin of my book.
Okay.
Mine is How to Succeed Without All That Anxiety on You.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a book that is, I believe, a bestseller called The Anxious Generation that
Mm-hmm.
just came out this year. And it didn't tell me anything that I didn't already know, but maybe that's because I watch education and watch what's going on with kids in society all the time for my job.
Right.
But we have definitely put so much strain on students. It's in so many areas. And we've gotten this idea that if they don't go to a really top name college, that their lives are over right there. I like to join Facebook groups, and I belong to a couple of Facebook groups of parents who want their kids to go to big name schools. And
Mm-hmm.
the pressure that these kids feel is unbelievable. And the parents are sitting there saying, well, should my child take AP this or IB that or a concurrent course at the community college? And I don't think that their extracurriculars show individual research that they've done. And does that research need to be published? And I'm sitting there going, this is an awful thing to see. And then my first reaction to all of this is, since when did parents start taking over their children's education? Let your kids decide which colleges are right for them. Let your kids decide what they want to go into and what courses to take. Why are you even asking other people? When we
Right.
take that ability and confidence in our kids to make decisions for their lives, we rob them of feelings of confidence and empowerment. And the result is anxiety. It's out of their control. They feel
You
they
know,
have no control over the situation.
I don't think I've thought of this before, but as you were talking about it, I think, or I wonder if that is driven by the parents' anxiety that they also see that there's only one path.
Oh, definitely. It
And
definitely comes from parents. And when you see it coming from schools, for the most part, that's actually coming from the parents pressuring the schools. There's a lot of complaining about grade inflation. In fact, I just wrote about grade inflation, which is now just endemic in high schools and is becoming endemic in colleges as well.
will you
Because
share what that is? Because I'm not sure
grade
everybody knows.
inflation means people are getting an A when they shouldn't get an A or a B when they shouldn't get a
Right.
B. And it's common. I mean, parents say in this group, they say, my child has all A's. Why weren't they accepted to Harvard, Yale, whatever? And the answer is these days, A stands for average. That does
Mm.
not stand for excellent anymore because the teachers are under such pressure to give kids better grades that they do it. And when they don't, the kids complain about it. And if the kids don't win, their parents come in and complain about it. And teachers end up giving in because this is not what they signed up for. They signed up to educate. And everyone seems to have forgotten that school is supposed to be about learning.
Right.
And I want to make it clear that I did not write an anti-college book. I think college is great. I went to college. My three kids went to college. We knew what we wanted. We were sort of natural students. We liked learning in a classroom, which is not how some people like to learn. My brother-in-law was an extremely successful entrepreneur who did not go to college. And he's now a successful artist, a sculptor,
Mm-hmm.
which he only took up at the age of 75. So, yes, there are people who just, that's their natural milieu, and there are people for whom it's not. But we have put so much pressure on teachers, on professors, and you would say, well, how can you pressure a professor to give you a grade that you didn't deserve? Well, 75% of professors are adjuncts. It means they're not actually staff. They're hired from outside. They have a contract. Almost all of them are insanely underpaid. And they go from college to teach a course because they have a PhD that they can't get a staff job as a professor on. And this is what they know how to do. But they have almost no job protection. So if the kids write negative evaluations of them, or if they're, say, an assistant professor and they're looking to get tenure, they feel they can't afford those negative evaluations because it will keep them from promotion, or they might get fired. So they give in.
And that's where it comes out, is, are we really preparing our kids to meet the needs of the workforce when they get out of high school, college, trade school, military, whatever it is? How did you find the participants in your book, or the people that you interviewed? How did you find those?
All sorts of ways. One of them is just talking to a lot of people about the book. And
Mm-hmm.
even if it was just a social conversation, someone would say, almost inevitably, I know someone who would be so great for your book. He does this and such, and that would end up with someone. I joined Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was interested in finding a costume designer
Mm-hmm.
who was, or a fashion designer. It ended up being a costume designer. Um, and I joined the costume designer group in on Facebook. Now, I didn't find her directly there because in journalism, it's not very often that things lead you directly where you want to go, but you follow them
Right.
where they lead you. And I heard about unions, the costume designers union. I went to the union. They had a list of all their people. I looked at every person down the list. Most of them had a bachelor's degree until I came to someone who didn't have a bachelor's degree, and she became the costume designer that I interviewed for this. Reddit was a good place to find people. You just put out word that you're looking, and people come in. So I called when it was the charity part of volunteering, and I particularly did residential volunteering because I know that a lot of young people would like to go off out of their home. That's what they would miss about not going to college, is that
Right.
they're not going to make the money right out of high school that's going to enable them to be self-sufficient. So I wanted to find things where they could learn, find out more about themselves, get ready for jobs that they would want in the future and what those jobs might be, and also be able to go off and live in a sort of semi-dorm like situation. So a place like Camp Hill, which is a series of camps around America and even in Europe and elsewhere for developmentally disabled adults. And they give people really nice room and board, a private room in a house that's shared with other people. So room, board, their food, health insurance, which is always a biggie,
Right.
and a small stipend so they have a little spending money. And they can stay they ask them to stay at least 6 months. I talked to someone who stayed 2.5 years. I talked to someone else who's been with them for 26 years. So, so she has made volunteer work into a living.
Right.
And the young woman I talked to who went there, she was a high school dropout who was working in a fast food restaurant after not graduating high school. And it just occurred to her, she just has this spirit that said, this is not going to be my life. I am not going to live my life as a fast food preparer.
Mm-hmm.
And she had the moxie and initiative to go online and look for volunteer opportunities. She found Camp Hill up in New York. She was from Florida. Went up, this very young woman, all on her own, to New York, found a wonderful community there. I mean, these aren't just places where you volunteer. They are a community. You learn about biodynamic farming, you learn about woodworking, you learn about all kinds of different things, as well as taking care of people who have difficulty taking care of themselves. And they even, at one of the places, they have a college where it's more action-oriented. You spend most of your time earning your credits by doing the work with developmentally disabled people or in biodynamic farming. And then there's one day of class each week. And it's free and it's accredited. So, but this young woman went there and realized she didn't know what she wanted to do. She never read books before. There were all these books around and people were valuing books. And she sat down, she had the spare time and lack of pressure, lack of stress to sit down with a book. And she was reading multiple books per week. She is an avid reader now. And she realized that what she loved the most at Camp Hill was taking care of older people and that she wanted to do that. She also met another young volunteer who liked working with older people. They married. They opened up their own intentional community for developmentally disabled people and then decided to move to Germany, where there are far more services for elderly people than there are here in the United States. She is learning, he's from German background. She is learning to be fluent in German. They are both studying for the certification that they need to work with social services for elderly people. They are happy beyond compare. And she wrote me the most beautifully written email about what they're doing now. So this most recent part about her being in Germany is not in the book, but I stay in touch with all these people because you develop a kind of relationship with them and an affection for them because they're such exceptional people in ways. And it was so beautifully written. And I'm looking at this going, here is this person who is a high school dropout. Everyone in our society would just give up on her. And just by deciding that she wanted something better and she wasn't going to settle for less, she found what she wanted. She didn't need to go to college to find what she wanted. She found what she wanted. She found a community. She's off in Germany learning a new language. Whoever would have expected this of the high school dropout, and writing me emails so beautifully written that they could have been written by an English major in college and then some. Mm-hmm. So, these are the things that I want people to be able to get out of the book, that it reduced her anxiety. If it didn't work out, what was the problem? So she'd given some time. It was a nice thing for her resume. Who knows where else it might have led her?
So if you're a parent and you've got a first grader, you've got a seventh grader, you've got a high school student, what would you say the message should be that we are trying to, lack of a better word, get it through, but to get through to our children as they're growing up, that's different than what they're hearing today?
I think the message that we need to give them, and we do that first more through our actions than with our words, is what are you interested in? What brings you joy? What makes you glad to get up in the morning? Okay. And the reason I say you do this through your actions is that involves exposing them to some of the things they might be interested in. And not worrying when they say, no, that's not for me, and no, that's not for me, and they throw aside 7 different activities, because that's fine. That's them making a decision. That's not them being a dilettante. When they find the right thing, they will be very glad. And I'll tell you that what I felt like saying to these parents on this Facebook group who are all excited about, well, if my kid does this and blah, 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 and how do they get into a top school? One of the best things you can do is go do something that has nothing involved with school, that you do because you love it, not because you say volunteer work will look good on my record, which everybody has done. And I, as someone who interviews for my college, I interview applicants, and you see these trends occur. Like at first it's these clubs, and what they are is they're all about raising money, and because the students don't want to get their hands dirty doing actual volunteer work, and then they realized that wasn't going to cut it with the colleges, so they moved on to other things, and everyone wants to do a leadership thing. And what colleges are really looking for right now, let me tell you, they have students with AP courses up the yin yang and all the lists of their things, and they're president of this club, and they started another club, which they usually started to look good for the college. They see through it all. They see through it all at this point. What they're looking for is someone authentic and someone interesting. And how do you be interesting? You be interesting by being interested.
Yeah. Curiosity.
Yeah, curious.
Absolutely.
And so that's what parents to do. Make your kids interested. Help your kids find their interest, and that will make them interesting people.
I think we expose our kids to so much, and as parents, we think they have to stick with it because you just have to. And I think that becomes a chore for the kid and an anxiety trigger, and it's like, okay, kids really don't have to stick with it. In my opinion, they do not have to stick with it. They do have to stick with it for a period of time. But just because they showed an interest in baseball at 5 does not mean they have to be showing an interest at 15. That can change. But I was going to say, when my son was 5, he was going to a Montessori kindergarten, but they had a teacher there who was studying a philosophy called Reggio Emilia, which is based out of Italy. And if I could have found a school to bring my children in that were based on this, I would have sent them there. What they did, the teacher noticed that my son was very interested in planes. So she brought in wood, and she started teaching him about how to measure the wood and how to build a plane. And then she took it, and then she had him watching, I don't know, maybe it was a video on planes. And then she had him teach the class how to make a paper airplane. And then they were talking about like how it arcs. And she was using something that was so interesting to him to teach him other concepts. And I know that that is impossible to do in a school that has 2,500 kids, but it's that whole premise that if we can get our kids excited about something, they can learn and be curious about the world because they want to be, and not because we're shoving it down their throat, which I think then leads to a calmer, less stressed out kid.
Yes, and we want them to be able to find happiness in life. I don't think it's a great thing for us, and I am so guilty of having done this as a mom, and I'm guilty of having done it to my own life, of putting off happiness. I'll go be happy when I've done this, or when I've done that,
100%.
and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden I realized one year that I had actually lost the capacity for fun. I didn't even really know what fun was anymore. And so I did a vision board. I was at a party where we were making vision boards for the coming year, and I looked for images of fun and made it my purpose for the next year to rediscover fun, which is a sad commentary when you think of it. I was in my 50s at the time, maybe my early 60s. And so we want them to not lose the habit of happiness.
Right. Enjoy.
We do that. We kind of beat that out of them in school. It's a shame. I mean, yeah, they have to learn certain things in school. And, I don't necessarily believe that everything needs to be play all the time.
Oh, it can't be, but
They should love learning. They should love what they're going to get out of learning. I mean, I know that, there's all the debate about phonics, non-phonics. Phonics does help kids who struggle to read learn how to read. But I also think when we focus too much on all the processes we're using, we forget about why are they learning to read? For me, it was that my mom used to read me storybooks all the time. And I was just a preschooler. And I was dying to learn how to read because I loved those stories. And I wanted to be able to read them myself. I wanted to be able to unlock the mystery of what those little black curlicues were and be able to read the stories anytime I wanted. I wanted to own the stories and not have to ask someone else for them.
And and you became a writer.
And I became
a journalist.
Yes. And so it's that we forget about, well, why are you learning how to read? If we're learning how to read so that you can look good on the standardized test, if we're learning how to read so that you can move on to the next grade, if you're learning how to read so that you can fulfill this requirement or fulfill that requirement, or the school can show this or that, we are moving in the wrong direction. Okay. Right. Not that we don't need to measure whether kids are actually learning how to read, but reading should be a joyous activity. And sometimes if you have to deal with phonics, it could be a little bit tedious, although I've seen teachers turn phonics into games. Yeah. But when you know you want to do that thing, that's when you can deal with all this stuff that's annoying because you know what you want to do. There are people in the book. There's one man who became a pilot for a major airline without a college degree. One of the first to do this. Delta Airlines just dropped their requirements for pilots down from a bachelor's degree a little over a year ago. And he
Wow.
had gone through a very, very difficult process with mentors to become a pilot in a different way. He became a pilot for regional airlines, which was what he could do. And then as soon as Delta dropped their requirement, he became a pilot for them. He had to learn stuff that's as tough as anything you learn
Absolutely.
in any college. He did have to get actual education, going to training classes, and he was able to do it because this was a guy who had loved planes since he was 5 years old and went on his first plane trip. He was hooked, and he never stopped being hooked. He tried going to college. It just didn't work out for him. He went to the community college. I gather the campus was sort of depressing. He didn't know what he was doing. He felt he didn't belong. He wanted to be a pilot so much that he went and got a job as a baggage handler just to be close to the planes.
Look
And
at
the
that.
people who worked with
Yeah.
him said, don't do this your entire life. It will break down your body. You can do better. And they helped him get introduced to a mentor who helped him get there. And now that he is a pilot and he is having just a blast with his life and he's flying all over the world.
What I'm hearing from you is that it may not be college that kids go to, but there needs to be some sort of a path for them. What is the next thing going to happen? I mean, once you graduate high school, then a lot of people can fall off if they don't have a path that they're thinking about, and it doesn't have to be the path for their life. One piece in the book that you talked about was the high school out of Sheboygan, and I would love for you to share what they learned and what they're doing to help kids, take off with their life.
So Sheboygan South High School, I talked to the counselor there. They were for a long time very intent on getting as many kids into college as possible and prepping kids for college and talking college all the time. And a lot of this was based on their own surveys of their graduates when they would ask them what they were doing. And 80% of them said they were going off to a 4-year college. And they said, okay, this is the vast majority of our students. We need to orient our counseling toward that. Then they got the data that started becoming available for the National Center for Educational Statistics. And those showed that no matter what those kids were saying on the survey, half of them were actually going off to a 4-year college. And by the way, of kids who go off to a 4-year college, 30% do not complete within 6 years, which generally means they've dropped out. They have the debt, but they don't
Yeah.
have anything, not even an associate's or a certificate to show an employer. So they realized they were ignoring half of their students, and this wasn't fair. It's like somehow you didn't count if you weren't going to college, which is what I see schools all over the place doing. It's sort of like you're either going to college or you can go get a job as a checker at Walmart. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more to life than that. Now, because manufacturing is still a very big deal in Sheboygan, they decided to focus on skilled trades. But they do more than that. They get students to start thinking during their freshman year what they want out of high school and what they want in the future. And as they go through school each year, they start making them be more specific about their plan and their hope and so on and so forth. And then in their junior and senior year, they have set up apprenticeships with the local companies, and the students get paid at these apprenticeships and they learn. And then after high school, they are employed at these companies. And so they haven't had to go even to community college to
Mm-hmm.
do this. And that's really, in essence, why I wrote this book, because I hope that school counselors will pick it up and read it and have an instant education that they can give students some guidance for. Do you know there's this? Do you know there's that? Or that they have copies they can loan out to kids and
Right.
say, here, take a look, see what interests you. Because kids don't know what might interest them till they see that it actually exists.
Well, I will tell you that I am recommending your book to both of my kids, who, by the way, are in college. And I think, again, there is There are kids that is their path to go to college, and then there's just kids that are not. But my son is going to be graduating, and he has got a degree in economics. He's got a minor in biology, and he's like, still, like, what do I do? And I think your book shows there are so many things to do,
There are so
and
many things.
it doesn't have to be one path or the other. You don't have to even graduate from college and then go right into the workforce. Maybe it's you do something else to explore what, because I do think there obviously is benefit in critical thinking and a lot of the stuff that kids are learning in college, but still they're still so young when they even when they graduate college, they're still young. So I think your book opens the eyes to possibilities
Yes.
for everyone. And I think that is the message that I think I would like to see for all sorts of kids out there and their parents too, is that there's possibilities out there.
Yeah, there are so many possibilities. It's really extraordinary. And there are more all the time. There are more apprenticeships, not just in skilled trades, but now in white collar jobs. It's become a big thing. We saw it mentioned a couple of times at the Democratic National Convention, that this is the way we want to go. There are organizations about this that help set up these programs where employers commit to skills before degrees. In other words, not that a degree can't matter, but what you bring to the job in the way of skills, abilities, is more important than just having a piece of paper. If you have a piece of
Right.
paper and the skills, great, but that we shouldn't ignore people who just have skills. Wow, skills are a great thing.
Yeah,
And
they are.
usually, I want to be honest, for many of the things in the book, you have to do something past high school
Right.
to be ready for these things. So, you can go do a volunteer thing without having training. They will train you, to do different things. But for a lot of things, it's good to go to community college and get a certificate. It's good to get an apprenticeship. It's good to get a traineeship. It's good to start at the bottom in a job and work your way up, learn how to do that. There are many, many ways to learn what you need to learn, but you usually need something past high school. Not everybody. There is one of the most successful sound designers in Hollywood does not have any training past high school. He, by the way, has dyslexia, and school was extremely difficult for him. So his way of perceiving the world was through sound. And
Hmm.
he used what gave him joy and what he was good at. And he went and he got his first jobs, really low level jobs, and worked his way up. And if you look him up, his name is Wiley Stateman, Stateman. You will see a list of movies you have absolutely seen. I mean, these are total A-list movies. Great guy. Talking to him about sound, he's so impassioned about sound that by the end of our discussion, I was thinking about sound for like the next 2 weeks. I never really thought about the qualities of sound before, but he
Yeah.
was talking about, when you stop a frame when you stop a movie in the middle, you still have a picture there. You have a frame with a picture. It's not moving, but you have a picture, but you don't have sound. Sound
Mm,
disappears the moment it's over.
that's
And
true. Hmm.
yeah, and that was, a new thought. So, at the end of it,
Right.
I was sort of almost dizzy with, why did he do this to my brain? Now I can't see anything in terms of sound. So, there are people who do it, entrepreneurs do it, but some
Yep.
of them also take some courses in it.
Yep.
There's one very successful young entrepreneur I spoke to. He'd been a tattoo artist, and then he opened up a Philadelphia ice company, but he opened it in LA where there were no Philadelphia ices. He got his training in a very informal apprenticeship to a man in Philadelphia who had a business. And he spent 3 months working for no money, but at the end of it, the man helped him get the equipment at a price he never could have thought of before. And he learned the business inside and out in the course of a few months. And he came back and he started up, and he was smart about using social media and smart about getting out there and giving out free samples. He's got a very successful business. So he did do that little bit of training. But then when I said to him, what would your advice be for others who want to be able to do the sort of thing you did? And his response was, read. I would have read a lot more.
Hmm.
And I would have made a lot fewer mistakes if I'd read a lot more.
Hmm.
Read everything.
Hmm.
So, these are, when we talk about these people, these are not people who don't think. These are not
Right.
people who don't read. These are people whose minds are alive, who are learning all the time. And my concern about college, as I said, is that it's become somewhat performative. People do what they need to do to get their bachelor's degree. And then actually surveys have found they do very little reading after that. It's like,
Hmm.
I was reading just to get my bachelor's, and then the learning stops. No,
Right.
that is not going to cut it in the modern world at all.
So, if you could have a piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice for parents of children that are heading off to that college age, what would you tell them, especially with the framework of protecting their mental health?
If they are sending their kids off to college,
Or if the kids are around college age, they're now making the decision as to what they're going to be doing.
I would honestly have them read the book and just say, is there anything here that, appeals to you? We know you can go to college. Number one, I think if your child is interested in going to college, and there are quizzes in the book for your
Mm.
kid and you to help decide whether he and you are ready for the college trip. If a kid wants to go to college, they should have a sense of intentionality about it. They should not be drifting off to college because it's what everybody else is doing, because they're under pressure from their parents or their teachers or their counselor. These are not helpful reasons to go to college. And if they don't have any idea what they want to do, is spending $80,000 a year the best way to find that out? And if they did find courses they love, which I did in college, I loved linguistics. I was a
Mhm.
linguistics major. I was going to go into academia. And then I realized my senior year that the actual job of doing linguistics was very different from learning about linguistics in college. And I realized I could not do that job. It was very detail oriented. It involved a lot of things that seemed to me very obvious. I like things that move. I like to learn new things all the time. I don't want to get into the little, most tiny minutia of a single thing. And so there I was saying, uh-oh, what am I going to do with my future? Don't make a mistake like that. College was a lot more affordable when I went to it.
Right.
It's, it becomes when students don't know why they're going to school, to college, or they're doing it because of pressure. 59% of them later say it was a waste.
Eesh.
So keep that in mind. Is your student ready? Does your student have, they don't need to know what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, but they need to know what interests them. They need to know how they plan to use college other than to date and go to parties. Also not great ideas for reasons for going to college. So help them with that. Help them realize whether they're ready right now to go to college, because it's not like they have to know what they want to do. But if they don't know what they want to do, it's better to go out and do some stuff. And you might learn what it is you love to do, or you might learn what it is you don't love to do, which is also valuable. So there was one guy in the book who went to off to the Coast Guard because he had no idea what he wanted to do.
Mhm.
He ended up working in enforcement of environmental laws out in the ocean, like ships that were dumping stuff, that sort of thing. That gave him an interest in marine science. And
Mhm.
he's now getting his PhD in marine science. He found his love going out there and trying something. He was exposed to various things in the Coast Guard. He might have ended up deciding he wanted to be a boat captain. He might have ended up deciding he wanted to be a deep sea diver, an underwater welder, who knows? But if they don't go out and experience, they don't know, what is this really like? And then when they found that, oh, are they ready to go to college? And they're ready to tell colleges their story and why
Mhm.
they belong there. And it will be an authentic story. If you've ever seen a high school kid try to write an essay for college, as I have with 3 kids who did this process, it is painful because they haven't done that much. They don't know who they are. So they make up these things because they're trying to show something that is going to interest the college admissions counselors, and sometimes they're pretty good and sometimes they're just sad, but they don't, when you've gone out and you've experienced things and you can talk about your failures and how that affected you and your successes and how that affected you and what got you excited and what bored you, what you found out about yourself, That makes you a very authentic applicant to colleges. And let me tell you, college admissions officers will be just drooling over your file. Um, so it's not going to hurt you in going to college to go experience life first. It's going to help you.
Karen, will you show us your book and let us know where you can buy the book?
Yeah, I'd love to. Here's my book.
Scoot it over just a little. So it's called Rethinking College, A Guide to Thriving Without a Degree.
And it is available kind of everywhere.
Good.
It was published by HarperCollins, and it is, of course, available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble. It's available in, it looks like to me, about 2/3 of Barnes and Noble bookstores, actual bookstores, but you can always go and just tell them you want to order it, and they'll order it for you. It's in a lot of independent bookstores.
Great.
It's in hundreds of libraries. If you want to just pick it up and take a look and, see if it looks like it's for you, and that you want to have your own copy, or you just, want to get it without buying it. This libraries are such a wonderful thing.
Karen, thank you so much. And I think it is a message that I know I have been preaching myself. And I'm glad to see there's other people on board and who actually have like data and real life stories rather than just me blabbing my mouth about how I think that there's more to college.
Yeah, and like I said, this is not a book about hate. I don't.
No.
I think college is great, but I think there are many paths that are great, and one is not better than the other, except maybe the one that leads to like getting arrested. But
Right. No, one is not better than the other. That's perfect to be perfectly said. Thank you so much, Karen.
thank you for having me. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.